what was that? Did you say? I didn't catch what you said.
That's us, three of us tonight, yeah.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and call the meeting to order. Please join in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, with liberty and justice for all. All right, can we do roll call?
Of course. Commissioner Donaldson,
Here?
Commissioner Giesenfield,
Present.
Vice Chair Jennings.
Here. Ex parte communications. Does anyone have any ex parte communications to disclose?
None for me.
No, I don't think so. No?
Me neither. Moving on to consent calendar. Consent calendar items are considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion. By approval of the consent calendar, the staff recommendations will be adopted unless otherwise modified by the commission, and there will be no separate discussion on these items unless a commission member or member of the audience requests removal of the items from the consent calendar. Is there any member of the audience or the commission who would like to pull any items from the consent calendar?
Well, I mean, I had a couple questions and comments about the actual wording of the changes to the zoning code,
Right.
but I'm not sure if that matters.
Well, and I had a question about that, and maybe the question may help with this. My understanding is that we're just initiating the process tonight.
Correct.
And we're not really being asked to fully consider the language, and so we will have another opportunity to make comments on it. Is that correct?
That's correct. Our zoning code requires that in order to amend Chapter 20, as an initial step, the commission has to adopt a resolution of intention. So what you see within that resolution is not binding in the sense that those red lines are definite. We will come back to you with a much broader discussion about that and really look at the language that you want to include as part of those amendments.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification.
I'm good. I've put 5 items on the consent calendar, and I have no problem with any of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not going to pull anything. I will just make the comment for, I believe it's planning application 18-043, the 1110 Ordway Street project.
Yep.
And I think that's the one that we've seen twice now. And
Yep.
I just wanted to say, I mean, I think it looks like they're responsive to our comments, which I appreciate. And I know there's a debate about the aluminum wood-clad windows versus aluminum, but I think the aluminum windows and/or wood-clad should be fine as presented. So, yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Well,
And
then,
is there a motion?
with that, then I'll move approval. No one from the audience pulled anything? No. I'll move approval of the consent calendar, all of the items on it.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye?
Aye.
Okay.
Motion passes. So if you are here for any of the items that were on the consent calendar, your project has been approved. There is a 14-day appeal period, so if you have story polls up, please leave them up. Otherwise, you're good. Okay, so moving on to item number 5, public comment. For persons desiring to address the commission on an item that is not on the agenda, this is the time to do it, and you're limited to 3 minutes per speaker. Is there anyone who would like to address us on an item not on the agenda? Seeing no one, we will move on to item 6, new business. So 6.1 is presentation of draft concept for Solano Avenue Complete Streets Plan. Do we have a presentation?
Yes.
do. Oh, wait.
Sorry. I'll just give you a quick snapshot. As we've mentioned in other meetings, we've been working on Solano Avenue Complete Streets Plan over the past year, working with Tool Design Group and Opticos Urban Design. We had a pop-up event in September, a workshop in May, and we're here with to bring you tonight, just kind of an overview of where we are in the process. And Megan Woolley-Ushdahl from Tool Design Group is here to give a presentation and an update.
Yes. Hi, good evening. Thank you for having me. So as Ann said, my name is Megan, and I'm with Tool Design Group. Our team on the project, also as Ann said, is Opticos Design and also Local Government Commission, which is a nonprofit that focuses on outreach. So that's the project team, and together with the city, we're excited to provide you with an update as we are sort of maybe 3/4 of the way through our process so far. So, and I'll take next slide, please. So tonight I'm going to give you an overview of the project, going to give you a snapshot of the community outreach that we've held, and look into the design recommendations and discuss next steps. So here's an overview of our schedule. We kicked off the project in February of this year, and since then we've been busy conducting an existing conditions analysis. We've held a robust public engagement that I'll show you some pictures of that in a second, and we've also developed the draft corridor design and also are in the process of currently drafting the draft plan, which will come before you in around December or January. So the project area that we're focusing on is Upper Solano Avenue. So this is Masonic to Tulare. We're focusing on this stretch because Lower Solano Avenue more recently received some streetscape upgrades, and so we're really looking to pull some of the very thoughtful streetscape design from Lower Solano Avenue up to Upper Solano Avenue. So what will our plan include? Our plan's really looking to develop vision and goals for Upper Solano Avenue. We're also going to give a look at what is it like today? What's it like to walk, bike, drive, take transit along the corridor today? And then we're going to take all of the comments that we've received throughout the community outreach process through the meetings that we've had with our community advisory group, and now that's comprised of business owners, representatives from the Solano Merchants Association, from the Albany Rollers and Strollers, as well as nearby community residents. And so we've been meeting with them as well as the Traffic and Safety Commission. So we're going to pull together all of this great thinking that that the community's done, that the city's done, into the draft design that we're going to actually show you tonight. The plan will also include some policy and program recommendations as well as how to get it done. So an implementation and funding plan. So next slide. So we want to ensure that the plan that we're developing really aligns with the community's goals. So throughout the outreach process, we've really heard these 4 main interests really rise to the top. So people are very interested in improving safety for all people who use Solano Avenue, interested in really enhancing the access to transit, as well as providing a cohesive streetscape. People say they really enjoy being on Solano. They love to shop, they love to eat, they love to run their errands, but that it doesn't always feel as though it could be more inviting, it could be more enhanced. You could have more of a sense of, I'm really on Solano Avenue. So really looking to support and just sort of bring up the things that people really love about Solano, and also Lower Solano, as we talked about. And then supporting the local economic activity that's there today. So in order to get community feedback, we held a walk, audit, and design workshop in late May. So we had about 40 folks attend, and it was just a great couple of days. So we had a charrette, and it kicked off with the community outreach portion. And then we can go to the next slide. And then we had an intensive design workshop with our urban designers from our team at Tool Design, as well as the team from Opticos, and we began to sketch out ideas. Actually, right in this room, we had a table set up right over there. So during this, we also had focus group meetings. So we met with folks from the Center for the Blind, and we also met with a bunch of business owners to get a sense of day-to-day, what is it like having a business? What's parking like? What's loading and unloading and goods movement like for you? We also met with city staff, including police and fire, to really get feedback on the initial ideas that we were developing. So then, next slide, please. So then what we did is we took all these ideas and we developed the corridor design that you see down here in the picture on your left. And so we after we developed this, it went through a city review process, but then we also wanted the community's input on this as well. So in late September, we held a design preview and pop-up event. So we had the corridor design at Flowerland, which was really fun and just very inviting. And so folks were able to really look at the corridor design, ask us a lot of really great questions. And then we also simulated what it would feel like if the design was implemented at the corner of Pomona and Solano Avenue. So I'm not sure if you were able to come by, but I hope you were. We had a temporary demonstration at that corner. So folks were able to, as you can see in the image, we used these straw wattles to simulate bow bouts, to simulate the refuge islands. So people were able to experience what's it like to cross the street, what's it like to drive through this area. So we had, of course, people driving their personal vehicles, but we also had a tanker truck come by and a FedEx truck come by. So we were really able to see what is it like for really bigger trucks to use this area and what's it like for personal vehicles to use this area. So next slide, please. So to give you a sense of what it's like today, this is a cross section. So this is sort of if you took the street and sliced it in half, what it would look like. So currently the travel lanes for the vehicles are about 20 feet wide. We have pull-in angled parking that's about 10 feet wide, and the sidewalk really varies in width from 6 feet to 10 feet. So next slide, please. So what this shows is this is the proposed intersection cross-section. So at the intersection, we really propose narrowing the travel lanes to 11 feet. We also recommend extending the curb, and the width sort of varies at the different intersections. And we also recommend extending the sidewalks in some places. So I want to dive in a little bit about why we're recommending this here. Intersections are really the most stressful point for pedestrians and bicyclists because it's where most conflict happens with cars. I'm sure you've experienced this yourself as you walk around. By narrowing the travel lane to 11 feet, this still is wide enough to allow fire trucks to go through, to allow delivery trucks to go through. But it narrows the travel lane such that pedestrians have a much narrower width to cross. And so especially by adding the pedestrian median in the middle, it really helps folks get from one side of the street to the other in a very safe way, especially because Solano only has signals at 2 intersections, and most of the corridor does not have I believe there's no stop signs other than those 2 signalized intersections. This really helps also to slow down traffic by narrowing the travel lanes, and that was a key goal that we heard from the community throughout the outreach process. So next slide. So this shows what it would look like at the mid-block. So you've now passed through the intersection and you're between the 2 intersections. This is what the mid-block would look like. It does widen out to 15 feet here. That allows for cars and space for bicyclists as well. But you don't really need as much of a pinch point in the mid-block as you do at the intersections because folks aren't often crossing the street there unless they're running across to reach Flowerland, which we've heard anecdotally a lot of people are interested in doing that. Okay, so the draft design was included in your packet, and I think tonight for the presentation, unless you have specific questions, which I'm happy to answer after the presentation, I kind of wanted to give you an overview of what are some of the common recommendations that we have throughout the corridor. So, and I think I might have you go to the next slide. So what we really wanted to focus on is serving pedestrians. So this is an example of some of the improvements that we made by, like I said, narrowing the travel lanes, adding in medians to the middle of the crosswalks, by restriping the crosswalks and making them high visibility crosswalks. Also realigning the curb ramps. So I don't know if you've experienced this, but many of the curb ramps on Solano Avenue, users are often pushed to the intersection rather than being pushed to the crosswalk. And so we really want to realign that so folks in wheelchairs and folks pushing strollers, that kind of thing, are much more comfortable. I think we can go to the next one. We also recognize that people drive on Solano Avenue, and we really want to be mindful of reducing conflicts for motorists as well. And so by providing more space for pedestrians, by providing just ways to slow down the vehicles, this will hopefully reduce conflicts and reduce confusion amongst users. So this is just a general overview of many of the recommendations that I've been speaking to you about. We're also recommending to widen and repair cracked sidewalks. There's many areas of the sidewalk throughout the corridor where maybe larger trees have uprooted the sidewalk. So we're looking at repairing the sidewalks in those areas, installing the curb extensions, as well as considering repaving the parking area or adding a textured pavement so that it visually narrows the corridor as folks are driving along. I think next one, please. We also want to be mindful of transit riders. So this is an AC transit route, and this design really seeks to make transit stops more accessible and more comfortable. So in many of the areas where we're recommending curb extensions, we're also partnering this with transit stops that can also be really activated as public spaces. So think about the parklet outside of Hal's Coffee on Lower Solano. So ways to make it a public living room, but then also serving transit riders as well. We've been speaking with AC Transit, and they have done an analysis of the corridor and found that there are two stops, one at Tacoma and one at Ventura, that they consider ghost stops. And so that means that folks aren't really catching the bus there very often. They're not really getting off the bus there as often as the other stops. And so this really slows down service. And so the AC Transit is interested in the possibility of removing those stops to increase the efficiency of the transit service. So this sort of does a double benefit in that it improves transit ridership, but it also has a net positive effect on parking. So we detailed this in the memo that we provided you this evening, but with the corridor design, there's actually a net increase of 9 parking spaces. And this is largely due to these closures of the 2 transit stops. So we're going to see an increase in 6 sort of regular parking spaces, and then an increase of 3 ADA accessible parking spaces. Also want to add that currently the parking stalls are not all at a consistent angle. And so as a part of the design, we've restriped the parking to be at a 45-degree angle. And this allows us to pick up a couple of extra spaces that can be used for bike parking or motorcycle parking. So there's actually also a net benefit of 18 spaces that could be used for motorcycle parking, or it could also be used for on-street bike parking, such as a bike corral, that kind of thing. So we are seeing a positive increase in the number of parking spaces. Okay. We're also looking to enhance the streetscape. I spoke a little bit about this, but looking at the lighting and the landscaping throughout the corridor, we're at the intersections where we're increasing the curb extensions, the bulb outs, thinking about how can we best program these. So in some areas it might be, this is really a great location for sidewalk dining, if maybe it's outside a restaurant, or maybe this is a transit stop, or maybe we want to add some nice landscaping that can also serve as stormwater management. So being very thoughtful about how to activate different spaces along the corridor. We're also looking at incorporating public art elements, so considering blank walls for possible murals or green walls. Also looking at places where there could be a gateway to Upper Solano and possibly Mid Solano, and also considering curbside management strategies, so thinking about loading and unloading, and where are locations that folks, we heard that a lot of people actually will park just briefly to pick up dinner, that kind of thing. So how can we have parking spaces that really serve people who are maybe using the corridor only for a limited amount of time to pick up dinner, that kind of thing. So And we also really want to look to support local businesses. So looking at the existing business ecosystem and building upon that with retail strategies, as well as creating public spaces to encourage people to linger and really spend time on Solano Avenue, say, well, how about we meet at the intersection of Solano and Santa Fe and just spend all afternoon there? So really creating a gathering places throughout the corridor. So we also wanted to give folks a sense of what would this actually feel like? Looking at a design drawing can be a bit dry. And so what would it feel like if I was actually there? So these perspective drawings were developed by our colleagues at Opticos Design. And so we've got 3 here to show you tonight, and we presented these during the pop-up event in September. So this is looking west at Key Route Boulevard. So you can see the picture in the top right-hand corner of the cleaners, which you may be familiar with. So this is looking at the possible alternative if Key Route Boulevard, at the southbound Key Route Boulevard was closed, and the design actually has an alternative to reroute it. But this could become a public open space, and it shows activity. This wouldn't touch the Veterans Memorial that's there now. This would be in keeping that memorial there now, but kind of enhancing it and building upon this as a public space. Interest in having more play areas, more public gathering space was heard throughout many of the outreach events. Okay. Now this is an example of the intersection of Solano at Santa Fe Avenue. So this was kind of drawing upon the idea of making a transit stop more than just a transit stop. So you may see this actually spells Solano, but also becomes public seating. And so folks could, get an ice cream or run an errand and take a break here. So this is really looking at activating that space outside of the California Bank and Trust. And then if you can see in the background, the blank wall, there's a proposal that could become a space for a mural. So you see how that space is activated. Okay. And then this is our last perspective. This is Solano at Tacoma Avenue. So this stretch of Tacoma Avenue is actually in the city of Berkeley. So Anne and her colleagues have been very diligent about ensuring that their colleagues in Berkeley have really been involved in these conversations. They actually sit on the community advisory group that I mentioned earlier. So they have vetted these designs and said that they really appreciate the designs that are put forward for Tacoma Avenue. So what's proposed here is currently the crosswalk there is very long, and it's stressful for folks who are crossing the street. And so this would be squaring up the intersection so that it shortens the crossing distance, and it also creates additional public space. So this would be, if you're heading south down Tacoma Avenue, what it may feel like heading in that direction. So as a reminder, we will be back to you in December to January with the draft plan. So this will incorporate all of the designs that I've presented tonight, as well as a write-up of our process and programmatic and policy recommendations moving forward. So if you have any questions, here is Anne's contact information, as well as her colleague Justin, who's a transportation planner and been working with us. And we also have this great, do you mind going forward one more, Anne? Sorry. Oh, there we go. We also have a great website that the city has putting together, has put together, but is managing, called Solano Complete Streets, and it encourages people to leave comments and also provides update on the process. So I'm happy to take any questions that you may have.
Great, thank you. Commissioners, are there any questions you would like to ask this time?
I probably have a few questions. Thanks for the presentation.
Sure.
Thanks for what you've done on it. It looks great. I mean, it really is. It's really an exciting project, I think. I may have a few questions, but I guess the first one that comes to mind is maybe you can talk about a little bit about the process and what happens once your report is done. And 'cause I'm interested in implementation already. So is there money for Complete Streets projects, and are you doing cost estimates? And so will we be applying for grants?
We're going to
try
be
to fund
looking
that?
for grants. At this point in time, it's really just the high-level plan.
Yeah.
And then once it is adopted by the city council, at that point, we would start applying for grants to do some initial design work.
So we need a plan adopted by the council, and then, okay. Yeah,
And just not to throw cold water, but to be pragmatic about this, the San Pablo Complete Streets Plan was adopted by the city council in December of 2013.
Yeah, a few
And
years
we are
back.
5 years later, just now in the stages where some of the design work is being,
it now is in the stages of what?
prepared.
Okay, so that has been funded then, or,
A portion of it has been
portion
funded,
of
but
it.
I bring that to your attention just to show that there is a bit of a time lag because we
yeah.
are applying for grant funding. So,
right?
we won't see changes overnight.
And just out of curiosity, where did the funding for this initial design work come from?
So we did get a grant from Caltrans in 2017, and that has funded this process.
Okay. Key Route, the Key Route Boulevard, I've looked closely at you have two options there.
That's right.
Is one preferred?
Yes. So thank you, Ann, for going back to this one. So when we've taken this out to the community, they really prefer the alternative. So
Okay.
that's this one right here.
Yeah.
The reason that they like that is that in the other design, and I would like to point.
It's right next to
Sure.
it.
Okay.
The other design is at the other, right there, yeah.
This doesn't allow.
A left turn,
That's right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'll record this when I say this in the
Yeah.
It doesn't allow the left-hand turn, and a
Yeah.
lot of folks have given us feedback that that's actually they make that turn a lot if they're heading to schools and running errands. Exactly. And so people say, I understand why you want to do this. Where the interest is to just having two intersections so close together is just makes it really difficult for drivers and for pedestrians. I'm sure you experience this all the time. And so we really wanted to simplify it. And so people are really gravitating towards the key route alternative. And it was pretty clear in both the outreach we did with the community advisory group and with the September pop-up event. The people really liked the alternative because it still allowed them to turn left, but that it also provided clarity to people. And so they also built upon this idea and said, would it be possible to extend the sidewalk north, through the median there, and had great suggestions for kind of play areas to go in the green space. So we still need to do I think some internal vetting of this idea just to ensure that city staff also agree that this is where we want to head, but we're leaning towards the alternative at this point.
Well, I have a couple of comments on that. I probably favor that option too, myself. But I'm thinking about parking for the dry cleaners that's there. They do a lot of, and there's one green space in front. Most everybody parks on Key Route and walks in. And it looks to me like they'd get 3 green spaces maybe, or they get some curb spaces on Solano. Maybe they'd gain 2. But anyway, I'm worried about access to that business. So.
That's right, and that's a concern of ours as well. And so with this design, that has been one of the main things that people have been asking. So currently, there isn't parking allowed right at the intersection of Key Route and Solano because there's a turn lane there. And so the green space wouldn't actually be taking any parking. I believe this is true. It wouldn't be taking any parking that's there now because there isn't parking there now.
There's one green space in front of the dry cleaners.
In front on Solano?
Behind the bus stop on Solano.
On Solano behind the bus stop.
Yeah.
Yes, and so that bus stop would remain there. Okay, so you're saying right there. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, what we'll do is we'll take another eye to that and look for that green space and double check that. There would still be parking allowed on Key Route.
Yeah, where you filled in the intersection, I think you'd be able to gain 2 parking spaces there, parallel parking spaces, not angle spaces.
Oh, I see what you're saying. here.
And,
Okay.
and you'd need that for the dry cleaners.
And I think we had talked about that in another iteration where we could dedicate that as a green zone.
You what?
We could dedicate that as a green zone for
Yeah.
dry cleaning
for
customers.
Pickup. And
Sorry,
anyway,
just to reveal my ignorance, what does the green zone mean? That's just
Oh,
like loading?
It's a it's a 20-minute
what,
parking zone.
15-minute parking or something like that?
20 minutes.
20-minute parking, yeah. Okay. The other thought I had is you have in that alternative, you have a very sharp 90-degree angle, just taking out some cherry trees and things like that. Two would be two 90-degree turns. You might want to consider blending them a little bit more, not having the turns be quite, taking up more of the median and having a more gentle merge. I don't know if it's a good idea or not. It would take out a lot of the cherry trees, which are probably might be important. They're planted by the fire department and the fire association some years back. And they have some pride of ownership in those, I know. Yeah, okay. Otherwise, I think that I prefer that option. Okay.
One thing I'd like to mention that you reminded me of in talking about sort of the design of the turn here, as y'all are probably aware of this, but this is still very much at the concept design level. And so the next steps is that this would need to go through an engineering design. This is sort of the way all these projects are done, but we're at concept design. It would still need to go to 30, 60, and 90% design. So what you see before you is still high level. It's still a conceptual plan. So a lot of these radiuses and dimensions would be verified further many times over throughout the process.
Have you been in contact with Safeway?
I have, yeah. I've been in contact with Safeway
Good.
Real Estate Division.
I raise that because they run big semi-trucks up there, and, they navigate the lower part of Solano right now, so without much trouble, I guess. But I think they should be, they should know about that. And they back into their loading docks, which are, poorly configured and difficult to get into. And I think they use the driveway that you're going to keep open for most of their work. But sometimes they're also on Nielsen there, and I don't know if they back in that way or not. So that was a thought I had, the effect on Safeway.
And then I'd also.
It looks to me like that, on your plan, you're showing that as leave the parking lot only, and would that be both an in and out access into the Safeway parking lot on that westernmost entrance
Yes.
driveway?
It's how it's currently configured, and that
Yeah.
would continue
Yeah, okay,
moving forward.
okay.
And we've also run the auto turn program on many of the intersections, especially around Safeway, with the
Oh, good.
recognition that larger trucks
good.
do enter Safeway. And so what we're proposing there are called truck aprons, which would continue to narrow the travel lane for personal vehicles. Truck aprons are they're engineering, kind of in our engineering toolbox. They're very comfortable for 18-wheelers, delivery trucks, FedEx trucks, that kind of thing to mount, but personal vehicles, it's a bit rougher. So it really encourages people to drive slower around there, but it doesn't impede emergency vehicles and delivery trucks. So we have run the analysis in those areas, and the larger trucks can still make the turns, even with the truck aprons that are proposed there.
Okay, good. I want to ask about street trees. And maybe at some point, there's some large trees there in the blocks, both sides of Flowerland anyway, that are big diameter, very mature trees. And at some point in their plan, I really hope you kind of indicate which trees would be removed. Because the public and us, all of us are going to want to know, want to go look and see, well, what are we going to lose? And I'm sure you're going to be putting in new street trees in many places. And that would really, where you're widening the sidewalks, that's a real important consideration, is what trees come out and what trees go in and where. That's a question I had anyway.
Yeah, we are working with the city arborist on, further identifying appropriate tree species. As you've probably noticed when you walk there, There is some sidewalk compromising because of the tree roots. We learned from the staff at Flowerland that a vehicle was actually totaled from a branch that fell from one of those eucalyptus trees. So there are some safety considerations, both on the ground and in the air, that we'd want to look at.
What was the public's feedback in terms of the Ramona Avenue intersection? I'm thinking of that because that's another intersection where you've cut off the left turn from the
Yes.
northbound traffic.
Ramona.
Let's see, on Ramona, I don't know, Ann, I'm sorry, I don't think I have the design in the PowerPoint for that.
Let's see. Okay.
The Ramona, they would still be able to make the, are you saying southbound, the southbound?
Yeah, because I think the
Oh,
two.
great, thank you.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Where are we?
Because the intersection is offset?
Oh, yeah.
I see.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
the southern
Yeah.
section of Ramona there can't really do the left turn.
Oh, the southern section.
Yeah, with
Yeah.
the double striped and the median.
Oh, I see, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. To be honest, I don't recall getting a lot of feedback about that. We'd be happy to hear it if you have it now, of course, but during the pop-up event, people didn't seem to bring that up as an area of great concern.
Okay.
Unless, Ann, did you hear otherwise? But-
I haven't received any comments on this particular intersection.
So that would mean because of that double stripe there that leads, that after the bulb or after the center median, then that would prohibit a left turn?
That would be
That's your way you read it. I hadn't seen that. That's interesting. You're probably right.
Yeah, let me look, I'll look into that
Yeah.
we're going to revisit the design
Yeah.
after we have your input tonight, and we're still receiving some of the community advisory group's input.
Yeah.
But we'll revisit that.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a good one, yeah. What's there, CVS?
Yes.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of cars would want to move down Solano, leaving there. Yeah, that's their parking lots and back there. So, yeah, there'd be a lot of people who want to make that movement. Good point,
That's my only thought.
yeah.
Great, thank you.
Good. I think I'm
good?
good. I don't see any other notes on here. I think I'm good.
Is
Yeah.
there any member of the audience who would like to address the commission on this topic? Please come on up. I don't know if you filled out a speaker card. Okay, if you could do that afterward and hand it to Ann, that would be great.
Evening. Ken McCroskey. There's a lot of good work here. Thank you to the consultants and staff, and everybody's contributed. There's a lot of good things going on, and as a traffic and safety commissioner, I can tell you that we received this very favorably and asked some similar questions and a lot of our own questions at our last meeting, and we're excited to see it go forward. As a stroller and roller, I want to say that slowing the traffic is fabulous for bikes, for cyclists who want to get on Solano. It can be pretty scary with the large trucks. We understand why they're there, and slower traffic would help. I want to point out, though, that while intersections are hazardous, often one of the scariest things on Solano is motorists pulling quickly into parking spaces. When cyclists don't feel comfortable in the lane, they're often next to and sharing the lane. Very often, motorists will spot a parking space and pull very quickly into that space without signaling. I've been in a car where this has happened. I was not driving, thankfully. I could see it happening to me both as a motorist and a cyclist. As a result of this concern, the Traffic Safety Commissioners requested that staff consider back-in angle parking. I don't want to go into that in the short time I have now, but I could certainly explain it if requested. Staff is responding at our next meeting, hopefully with a demonstration, so that we could take a look at what that might look back like and share with the community what that might look like as an option. I think it covered just about everything I was concerned about. There definitely needs to be something done about the different types of people who need to bring their cars to Solano, whether they're getting a ride share, whether they're picking up dinner, whether they're dropping grandma off at the restaurant and then going and finding a more long-term parking space. Especially after enforcement ends, it gets really scary out there in the dark in the winter. A lot of people double parking and all. But we'll be covering that at Traffic and Safety. The only other suggestion I have is a personal suggestion, not from any one of the groups I'm associated with currently, and that is to consider an informational sign that could span Solano Avenue, perhaps an electronic sign. There is currently no place on Solano Avenue to mount a cross-street banner. It's our main street. It would be great to be able to advertise our events and inform the public about things going on in our city. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask you a question real quick? Not to put you on the spot, but just as especially in your capacity as a representative of strollers and rollers. I guess one question I had when looking at the overall design is, and I get wanting to slow down traffic through the intersections, and that seems good overall, but is there a concern about that becoming more of a pinch point for cyclists and actually increasing risk to cyclists if you, it's like, it looks like such a tight funnel through there, and you might want to address that as well, but I was just curious if you say that, no, that's not a concern at all, then.
Well, I wouldn't just take my word for it, but I can tell
Yeah.
you we did discuss this at Traffic and Safety, and as a cyclist and a league-certified cycling safety instructor, I can tell you that the best use of the space currently on the street is that when you're going downhill or west, you can generally get close to traffic speed. So we recommend that you don't share the lane with drivers, that you join the traffic lane. We call it taking the lane.
Okay.
So that's downhill, and that actually protects you somewhat from the cars backing out, and it makes you part of what's going on in a very positive way. Now, unless you have an electric bike, it's pretty hard to do that going uphill. So, I'm a fairly strong cyclist. I share the lane going uphill, but I'm also going slower, so the threat of cars backing out of me is a little less. I've got more time to react. This plan actually makes it difficult to share the lane going uphill. And that was one of the comments that Traffic and Safety Commissioners made, that we were a little worried that there wasn't that extra space to have that level of comfort.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And I want to stay in our lane, so to speak, and not get too much in the weeds on traffic engineering type stuff. But that was just, I think that there's a lot in this plan that looks fantastic, and I love the streetscape improvements and making things more pedestrian friendly. But I think maybe the next time this comes back, if it could also talk a little bit more about the bike piece of it and how that fits in, I think that would be helpful. Yeah, go for it. Thank you.
I see the floor.
I'm really glad you asked about that, because that is a piece that I should have included more information about in the presentation. So Solano Avenue, the way that we approach the design is that we're really considering how bikes get across Solano Avenue. We are also mindful of how they get along Solano Avenue, but as Ken said, we're really looking, or would encourage cyclists to take the lane. By slowing down cars, it makes it a more inviting area for bicyclists to be as well. In the city's plan, Solano Avenue is not identified as a bike route. So there, as y'all know, there are bike lanes on Marin as well as the parallel street to the north. And so those are really considered the main bike arteries throughout the community. So what we've tried to do in the design is really provide better bike connections through Solano Avenue. So we have proposed a location for a rapid flashing beacon at Peralta. And Peralta is identified as a bike route in the city's plans. And so the way that this, one more, thank you, perfect, that's perfect. You can see there's also proposed conflict markings to help facilitate the bike traffic north and south. We're proposing the installation of push buttons that could be accessed two separate push buttons, some that could be accessed by pedestrians, but then some that could be accessed by bicyclists so that they wouldn't have to dismount from their bikes in order to push the button. And the thought is that, so those are some specific bike route treatments. We've also gotten feedback throughout the community engagement process that Curtis is identified in the Berkeley bike plan as a bike route. And so there's been encouragement for us to look at providing better north-south connections across Solano on Curtis as well, to align up with your neighboring sister city. By teeing up many of the intersections, by providing just ways to slow down traffic, we're hoping that all of those will have spillover effects to better serve bicyclists. But this has been a really big topic of conversation for the city and for the project team throughout. And so these are some of the considerations that we've been giving to the bicycling users. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Are there any other comments before we wrap this up?
One more comment I wanted to make. The public art component is intriguing here and not to be overlooked. I'm excited about some of the drawings you proposed. I would urge extra care and extra communication down there by the Veterans Memorial at Key Route. I stood there today and trying to envision how a modern kind of recreational facility could be integrated into that space that would be freed up next to the Veterans Memorial, which is kind of historic and Art Deco sort of style, and not something that at least a lot of us old timers in Albany would want to see modified. How to integrate that, I think, I see that as a real challenge, and because I don't know quite how to do it. That being said, I'm quite intrigued with the idea of freeing up that street space there and having some extra open space at that location. So I'll make that comment. Your focus on Santa Fe as being a real pedestrian gathering place is lacking sort of a restaurant or an ice cream shop, or that seems to be the magnet. Ice creams or coffee seem to be the magnet for people. But, with the bank there and the other uses that are there right now, the small retail, I think, you have to work with some businesses to really make that happen. And I don't know if we have any businesses there that are really going to serve or sell goods or serve goods that are going to make people want to linger at that location. So anyway, but I sure did like the bus stop idea that says Solano. So there's some real nice things, very nice things. A very good project. Good job. Yeah.
Yes, agreed. Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 7.1. This is planning application 18060 and application 18064, design review, parking reduction, and tentative parcel map for 1057 East Shore, the target property.
Yes. We brought this to you originally in September without the tentative parcel map, just kind of a cursory review of the parking reduction and design review. And as part of that review, you asked for some additional information. You would also receive some correspondence related to that. So we're back before you tonight with the complete package of the two applications, one for parking reduction and design review and the other for the tentative parcel map at target. In effect, there's the three requests. So overall, the site is 9 acres with an existing 175,000 square foot building, which includes the garden center. As part of this scope, the garden center is proposed to be demolished. That's a little over 8,000 square feet. That would be replaced with 20 parking stalls, and that portion of the facade would be restored to match the existing building appearance. The overall parking reduction would be reduced from 516 off-street spaces, where 439 are required, to 376 off-street parking spaces. And actually, when this was originally built, Target way overparked the site by design. So they more than complied with the requirements that were in place at that time and currently. And then the last entitlement is a parcel map that would create a 1.1 acre parcel that would be sold at a future date. I'm sure everybody is familiar with Target, but just to give you a little context, it is here on East Shore. This is Interstate 80, and you have Golden Gate Fields across the freeway, so it is down here on East Shore. This is the street view of the facility as it exists today, and this is the garden center that is located immediately in front of the building that's proposed to be demolished. Just to give you some background, there was a series of entitlements that went with the original construction approvals in 2003. This included an EIR, a conditional use permit to authorize retail use, design review for the actual construction, a tentative parcel map, which at that time consolidated non-conforming lots to create legal lots for the future construction, and a variance to exceed the 45-foot height limit for the zoning district. As part of that, the garden center, the building was completed in 2004. That garden center was functional up until 2011. It was briefly leased to a third party, and then the space has been vacant in the past 4 years. So as part of your initial review, there were a series of things that the commission requested as part of additional information for future review. One of the things was revision to the facade to incorporate some landscaping. And as part of this rendering, which was included in your packet, it also now shows the covered bike parking. Target is proposing 20 bicycle spaces at the store entrance. This is covered parking that would be in front. And speaking with the applicant, there may be some consideration to a different material use for the cover. So right now it's shown as metal, but it may be a durable canopy, just kind of depending, but this is effectively the footprint and rendering of what that would look like. The question had come up about whether or not they were compliant in terms of our bicycle parking code requirements. Given the size of the store, there would have been a requirement for 110 bicycle parking spaces. Right now, they're proposing, I believe they have 10 currently, and they're proposing an additional 20, so this would give them 30 bicycle parking spaces to serve the store. You'd also requested additional parking demand data from Target, which was included in your packet as attachments 10 and 11, and it provided a background on the data which they've collected from stores nationwide, tracking sort of parking and parking demand trends that they observe during their busy time of the year, which is the holidays. One other thing to note was that you had received a letter from Friends of Five Creeks regarding creek maintenance. And just for clarity purposes, at that time it was suggested by Friends of Five Creeks that it was contained as part of the use permit. It's actually part of a separate memorandum of understanding. So the original project approval had a condition that required maintenance agreements to be specified. You've received that attachment in your packet, and then there is a separate MOU that functions independently of the Planning and Zoning Commission defining who's responsible for cleanup. And just to give you a snapshot on the parking, as I mentioned, the site is currently parked in excess of the requirements, so there's actually 78 additional off-street parking spaces that are provided. Under the current proposal, Target's effectively asking for ratio of one space per 444 square feet. So it's a reduction altogether of 42 spaces, as they would be providing 376 on site. There are 160 spaces that are provided in that remote field lot that would subsequently be sold off for a future user. However, Target has indicated that they do require cross-access reciprocal agreements, and I believe they have that with Toyota of Berkeley. They would certainly have that same requirement for a future user of that property. You received one item of correspondence in regards to the latest staff report regarding recent creek cleanup efforts. That was sent by Friends of Five Creeks and forwarded to you. And just to give you some additional context, there was a pretty major effort on October 1st and 2nd, earlier this month. There was an incredible amount of debris that was removed. I think in the initial cleanup effort, there was 5 tons of debris. This effort continues to be ongoing and is primarily led by the City of Berkeley, but Target is also working with them collaboratively to ensure that the site continues to be clean. You also had received correspondence as part of the initial packet that went out in September. There were 2 emails and 1 letter that were received and forwarded. They were also included in your packet this time around. There was a letter from AC Transit, a joint letter that was signed by 7 Albany residents, and then the Friends of Five Creeks letter that you received. Just to refresh your memory, AC Transit originally had asked for a condition of approval that would have required Target to conduct a feasibility analysis to potentially extend AC Transit service, as well as accommodate bus staging, on-site circulation, roadway circulation, and passenger accessibility. As was noted to the Commission last time, we had concerns about this, and so we ran them through our legal counsel, who concurred that this doesn't really meet the rough proportionality test. This is effectively an ask between an outside agency and a private entity, and it would put the city in an uncomfortable position of having to potentially mediate disagreements. Also, with the complete package of entitlements, we didn't see a nexus that would trigger the requirement of the feasibility study. I did want to let you know, however, we met with AC Transit and Target last week. So all 3 parties went out last Tuesday to discuss transit access, and I'm happy to share with you that Target and AC Transit will continue to maintain communication on future transit access independent of the city. There are 2 CEQA provisions that apply to the entitlements for the design review and parking reduction. It's an existing facility, so it's categorically exempt pursuant to Section 15301, existing facilities. And the tentative parcel map is exempt pursuant to Section 15315, minor land divisions. And with that, we recommend approval of the project. One thing to note, I sent the Commission an email yesterday. There was some language in the findings that incorrectly referenced residential. That was omitted. The revised staff report with the appropriate zoning-specific findings is included in the revised report that you received yesterday and is also posted on the city's website.
I have a question about that, so maybe we can just take that for a second. And apologies, because I didn't compare what was originally there versus what's there now. But I printed out the staff report today from the city's website, and there is still a finding about the availability of new housing. So I just wanted to make sure if I was looking at the right set of findings. And specifically, so this is on page 18 of the agenda packet, and it's finding number 6.
Yes, that's another thing that we will need to correct as part of the record.
Should be correct, okay.
And then I also wanted to note, just while we're on the topic, that on number 7, finding number 7, I think, well, the explanation just wasn't totally clear to me. I think that there probably aren't reciprocal access easements recorded because it's currently just a single parcel.
Right, it's a forthcoming action, and I can modify that to acknowledge that the reciprocal access agreements will be in place with the future sale of the parcel.
Okay, I think that's fine, and you might just want to make it a condition of recording the final map, something to consider. But I'm getting a little out of order. So, are there any other questions of staff about this?
Probably I'm out of order too here.
Okay.
But another question I had, and I have looked at that tentative parcel map, and I have trouble. I do not know what the boundaries of the new parcel are. It says parcel A and parcel B, but I can't find the boundaries. And so I think that needs to be clarified, and maybe the architect can help us with that.
Yeah, we
It could
can.
be that I'm not clear on my computer, or it could be an issue with the cross easements. It might be good And I'd be interested in knowing where those different easements are. Yeah, right there, that figure there. Where in the heck
So
is the boundary for parcel B?
So-
What are we splitting off exactly?
So parcel B is this entire parcel, and I think we had the same reaction because when I looked at it, I was confused by this line that was drawn here, thinking that that was a property line. This, in fact, is a pretty major sewer easement that runs through the property.
Okay, yeah.
So parcel A is effectively all of this side of the property. Parcel B is this portion, and then this is the boundary that would be shared with
and-
Toyota of Berkeley.
That's the part that would be shared with the Toyota.
Yeah, so this is the Toyota of Berkeley building right here. This is the
Yeah.
driveway aisle.
Okay.
And so parcel B is this.
That, but where is, and how about the roadway there? What part of the existing roadway does the roadway go down to that dotted line there at the end of the Village Creek easement there? Is that where the roadway is? Farther to the west from where your cursor is? Keep going.
So the
Way
center
down.
line of the,
There's the Village Creek thing, yeah. And so, anyway, go down closer toward Cleveland Avenue.
Would the
I'll let-
applicant like to
Let him,
address this
does he know where it
question?
is?
Okay.
Yeah, we really need to know this.
The line comes up here, across here, and sort of jogs, continues up around the corner, across the
And
intersection.
so that's the line I was thinking of. So that's the parcel boundary there, that dotted line through the intersection there?
Correct.
Okay,
The drive aisle is all within the separated parcel.
okay, all right, yeah. Okay, and then and where are your access easements? So is there one shared with the Toyota?
Across a blanket access easement.
Pardon?
It would be a blanket access easement,
Okay,
so anyone entering the site would have access to any portion of the site. You
Okay.
can park anywhere, you don't have to be parking over here if you're using that, then you could walk over to Target at the same time without being.
okay, so I'm confused. It seems to me that if you sell this to someone, they're going to want to develop it with something. They'll
That
put
was the
buildings on it.
intention.
And then what?
They would have to maintain whatever requirement for parking on their parcel.
Uh-huh. Okay.
It'd be subject to all the current standards.
And would there be any withheld conditions on behalf of Target where Target might be able to use this for overflow parking?
Well, there would, that would be part of the cross-access agreement that Target customers can park there.
And do you know how many spaces Target wants to reserve there?
I don't think at this time they would want to reserve any specifically. They feel as though they've maintained enough on their site for their demand. If
Okay,
a customer is, going to the future use on the smaller parcel, they're welcome to park there and then go to Target or go to Toyota.
okay.
It'd operate like a shopping center where they're,
Okay, yeah. So it's kind of the way that they would do it at shopping centers then, yeah, okay. Mhm. All right. All right, that helps. I'm glad to know what the boundary of the parcel is.
a lot of lines on the front. It's kind of hard to keep them all clear, I understand.
Okay, thank you.
And while you're up here, is there more of a statement you'd like to make about the project?
No,
or-
actually, Ann did an excellent job of presenting the project, and I really don't have anything more to add. If I can answer any questions, I'd gladly do that.
Well, I wanted to say thank you for providing all the additional information. I think that the additional info that was provided on the map and on the parking demand really addressed all the questions I had. And I'm glad to see that, the cleanup effort happened. It's a little bit outside of the specific request, but
Right.
it's obviously a concern about how the site is being used, and
There
so.
was an additional meeting today to determine what vegetation to remove, what was native, what was not native, and it was, I think, with the city of Berkeley and other agencies. So
Okay.
that's ongoing.
Okay,
That's great.
great.
There's
Thank you.
there's a lot of litter along the creek fences in there. It's really bad when I was walking down there today. So I know a lot of cleanup has been done, but that's on the edge of your parking lot and a lot of food containers and things like that. And I think that you should tell the Target people, the people, whoever's responsible for maintaining the parking lot, that they just need to go another 15 feet farther up to where the creek fences are, and it's really badly littered.
Okay.
It needs to be
Let them
fixed.
know.
They need to do a better job in that, so.
And I guess that there's a question I could put to staff about that, which is, are there operational conditions of approval about, maintaining the site or keeping litter picked up or preventing it from getting into creeks or?
We don't have anything specific to these entitlement requests. I
Right.
suspect the conditional use permit from 2003 would have more specific operational
Yeah, sorry,
requirements.
that's what I was asking about, but I know you probably don't have the whole thing memorized, so.
Yeah, we could, I'd be happy to take a look at that, but it's a pretty lengthy document, so I
Sure,
wouldn't
yeah.
be surprised if there are general provisions about site maintenance.
Okay.
I had a couple other things. Maybe this is for you, Ann, more than anyone. Also sign permits required here, and that is a separate process? You
Yeah,
know?
if a sign permit application were to come in, it is subject to architectural review by the Planning and Zoning Commission because it's in the CMX zone. As part of this application request, we do not have any request for signage at this time.
No, so
There are no proposed changes to any of the signage as part of this project.
Yeah, so
Okay,
the little
I see,
monument
I
sign that
see.
you see from East Shore, the on-building signage, that's all proposed to
a
remain.
couple of the elevations have arrows pointing down to signs. Those are existing signs
Yes.
then? I see. Okay. That's good. Okay, and then the other comment I have is that I'm disappointed with the city attorney's position on this. I bet arguments could be made otherwise, but I continue to think that we're allowing Target to really benefit from this by spinning off this excess parking, getting rid of an entire parking lot, and this is a significant parking reduction, and I really think that there would be a nexus to allow the city to have a condition in here that would require more than what's being required of them to work with AC Transit to try to get transit use down there. I think it's going to would benefit Target. I'm disappointed that your client, that Target, is kind of resisting this and saying, I think they don't get it.
Can I
And so
just
anyway,
want to clarify,
just my comment.
our position is that we're not going to intervene between effectively a non-regulatory agency in this case, because they are providing public service and also Target, which has come to us for entitlement requests. The meeting that we had last week, I thought it was a productive meeting. There will be ongoing discussions, but it's really for Target and AC Transit to determine what's going to work, because effectively it would be putting a bus stop on private property, and that's not something that the city's necessarily going to regulate.
Yeah. Okay.
And I'd also add to that, just for clarity purposes, from what I understand from AC Transit, there's no funding to extend that service. So this really is a big kind of a guessing game at this point. It would be one thing if it was concluded that service, would be beneficial there, but it would be another thing to fund it, and that's absolutely not in the city's purview to require.
Okay.
Is there anyone in the audience who would like to address the commission on this?
Good evening. Thank you. First of all, I want to apologize for sending a letter to your meeting about a month ago and then not showing up to back it up. Thank you for discussing it. I do appreciate that. And it turns out that these meetings often coincide with the AC Transit board meetings. So I'm told that AC Transit staff had wanted to be here at that meeting and this meeting and just are not available at the time. So they make their apologies as well. To that last point, it's true that there is no set-aside money at this time for within AC Transit for extending bus service to the Target lot or the Target location. Having said that, we just sat through a long item here tonight where there's no funding for construction and yet we're strongly considering it. AC Transit is committed to looking for money to fund this kind of extension and serve the population that visits Target or works at Target. That's what they've stated to me, and I hope they would state that to you at some future time in a letter. Let me just say that it's not my intention to hold up this process at this time, just to be very clear. This is what it is. We have an opinion from the city attorney. Fortunately, it's sort of kicked up this issue again, and hopefully we can keep it moving, but that doesn't have to impede what's going on. That just doesn't seem appropriate at this time. I will say that this is sort of an opportunity, and there is an opportunity in the form, if you look at your sheet 2. Yeah, sheet number 2. If you look by the driveway to Target along East Shore, there's a small spot of land that currently is sort of a green sward with some access points. It essentially was designed originally as emergency access. That may be an option for a stop and a layover, and something that's under discussion. So that this is not a dead issue, and I think it's an opportunity. Again, secondhand, I'm told that AC Transit would like to work both with Target and with the city to pursue this opportunity. Obviously, the city is not going to take the lead on that, but I think you have it within your purview to request that city staff pursue the matter. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address the commission? No. Okay, let's bring it back for discussion. You're good? Okay. Commissioner Donaldson?
Eric's good with it, okay.
More you'd like to say?
Yeah, do I have more to say? No. My biggest question was, what's the parcel that we want to spin off? And that's been answered, I think, now I understand it. I don't think I have any other, concerns. I think the project is, as far as the modifying the former greenhouse area or plant sales area is fine. That works great. I'm actually glad that Target feels comfortable spinning off this parcel. The project has been overparked for a long time, and this is and I don't know what we'll see on that land eventually, but this is a good move, and I hope it works out well for everybody. I'll still say again that I think that AC Transit, that everybody would benefit if AC Transit were extended down to Cleveland Avenue and down to this site. Somehow I have a feeling that a lot of Target employees would take the bus, and if they had the opportunity, and it would make it easier for Target to staff this site. I don't know that many shoppers are going to go there, but the presence of a bus on Cleveland would benefit the city and would benefit Target, but also other people there, people dropping off their Toyota for service and being able to come and get it, that kind of thing. So anyway, otherwise I have no problems, and I'm happy to move approval of the project. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah, I mean, the only brief comment I'll make is that I appreciate the applicant's sort of responsiveness to, I know specifically my request to provide drawings that more clearly define the revisions to the parking in terms of additions and removal, and the incorporation of the canopy for the bike parking. And I just want to confirm with staff and or the applicant, so the existing bike parking is going to remain, and these will be additional. Great. So I think, the increase of the bike parking and the landscape for that new area looks good. So yeah, I don't have any major problems with it.
Great. Yeah, and as I said at the last meeting where we considered this, I also, I think it's an appropriate plan for unused parking, and obviously the garden center isn't doing much gardening or anything else right now, so I'm supportive of the overall scheme. I guess two quick comments. One is I would encourage staff to do some kind of review of compliance with existing conditions of approval on the overall project. I think this is less of a kind of a regulatory request and more of just, it seems like a natural point to assess the overall conformance with conditions, and if there is any, additional work that could be or should be done around site maintenance and trash control and that kind of thing. This just seems like a good time to take a look at that. So I'm not suggesting that as an additional condition of approval, it's just more of a comment. And then also to clarify the comment that I made about access easements, I was mostly focused on just ensuring that there is access to the public roadway, and I wasn't talking about imposing any kind of conditions that relate to shared parking, because I think that's just kind of between, or it's really Target and whoever the future purchaser or user of the site is. And then with respect to the AC transit issue, I mean, I would very much like to see the 18 line extended down to the East Shore Freeway. I mean, I live, up Buchanan, but it's like treacherous to walk down there, and I hate drive. I mean, it's not very far to drive, but I always drive to Target because there's not a good way to get there. I would totally take that bus. And I really do want to see Target continue to, really in good faith pursue those discussions with AC Transit in terms of, what we're able to impose on the project. I'm not seeing that there is an ask before us right now that's really clearly defined or feasible in terms of requiring them to do something on the privately owned parcel to facilitate AC transit. So I don't think we have a lot of options realistically to impose those kinds of conditions. But I do just want to again clearly say I think it's a great idea, and I hope you do. I hope Target does really take a hard look at it, and hopefully the funding will materialize. So with that, I'm done.
Can I have one last question for the applicant? In your plan, I'm just really curious, like any of the plans, you're showing 3 little circles and some rectangles kind of by the bike parking in the new section. I just wanted to get clarity as to what those were indicating. If you go to any of the sheets for the bike parking, any of the enlarged plans.
By the garden shop?
Yeah. Okay, yeah.
Sheet three, maybe? Yeah.
Or actually not where the new proposed plan is.
Oh, that's the existing. Yeah, that's existing.
Yeah, so there's those 3 circles and rectangles.
This is the existing street parking
No,
lot?
I'm sorry, no,
With the two fixtures and
up
then
by,
we're moving it?
no, I mean up by where it says existing bike parking. Right there, yeah, those
are
circles.
3 concrete pedestals for sitting on.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
The big red balls.
And the rectangles are,
These are 2 benches that are out there now. This is a landscape area. These are the 2
Okay.
existing bike parking racks, and there's 3 on the other side of the building.
okay,
Yeah, that's all street furniture.
Good.
thank you.
Good.
I mean, unless there are any other comments, I'll make a motion to approve, sorry.
Here you go.
Planning application.
Planning application 18060 and planning application 18064, design review, parking reduction, and tentative parcel map for 1057 East Shore. As presented,
I will second.
Okay.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye?
aye.
Okay. approved. All right.
Okay, so your project has been approved. You don't have story poles up, but there's still a 14-day appeal period. Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 8.1, study session, zoning ordinance revisions to streamline commercial development review.
This will be quick.
I'm going to turn it over to Jeannie Iceberg, our contract planner, who prepared the staff report and the presentation that you'll receive this evening.
Thanks. Hi, good evening, commissioners. We haven't been here in a few months, but we have talked about this topic a few times. So since it's been a little while, I just wanted to give a quick overview of where we were and where we're headed. So again, we're working on implementation of the Economic Development Strategic Plan, and specifically around this program 4C about removing constraints to commercial development to try to streamline the plan approval, the review and approval process. So specifically looking at allowed uses, design review and permits required, and parking ratios. So again, our objectives here are about streamlining that process and encouraging well-designed retail. And specifically, we're looking at the 3 commercial districts in the city and looking at tailoring the revisions to each of those districts to meet the purposes of those districts because they are unique. So we've met 3 times now in the spring and summer and mostly talked about use regulations and parking requirements during the course of those meetings. When we met in June, you may recall that commissioners had a few questions that we responded to in the staff report. So one was about how the Economic Development Strategic Plan fits into the city's adopted policy context. And so there's some discussion in the staff report about the relationship to general plan policies around parking and district uses and around the climate action plan and the relationship there. Another item that the commission asked for more information on was best practices for setting commercial parking standards. So there's a discussion in there of what some other communities are doing. We talked to W-Trans, which is one of the city's on-call transportation and parking consultants, and talked to them about the idea of blended rates. So right now, the city's code has several pages of commercial parking standards for all of sorts of different uses, and in communities that have streets and downtowns kind of similar to Solano Avenue, where people don't just park, they visit multiple stores at one time. There's a tendency to use blended rates, or to have different standards by different districts versus having one standard that may be appropriate for restaurants across the whole city. We also provided some analysis of retail tenant sizes, which really showed that recently we're seeing a lot more smaller spaces, less than 1,500 square feet. And then lastly, a little analysis of mode share, which is provided in some graphs in the staff report. But the heart of why we're here is to talk about potential changes to the ordinance. And so there's really nothing new here, but since we were refining things over the course of our meetings, we wanted to come back and do one more study session and make sure we're on the same page about the approach, and then we would come back with an ordinance next month, and it would look like a red line strikeout version of the existing code. And so this is still at the more conceptual level, although we're actually talking about which tables and which code sections to make amendments to. So I'm going to go through briefly the key points, and if you want to go through this, I'll recommend if you want to go through things point by point that we use the staff report to organize that. But so one, we're looking at updating the district purpose statement. So this is what's appropriate on Solano versus in the commercial mixed-use areas and on San Pablo. Adding some definitions for more contemporary uses, including custom manufacturing and food and beverage preparation. The city's seeing a lot of breweries, micro distilleries, that kind of thing. Third, creating more of a hierarchy for allowed uses, and so segmenting where auto-oriented uses may be more appropriate on on San Pablo and in the commercial mixed-use areas on the west side of town versus on Solano, which is much more pedestrian-oriented. Standards for specific uses, and this is specifically around things like hours of operation, noise, as it relates to alcohol service, gyms, again, the food and beverage preparation. One thing we did add, which was a request by commissioners, or at least a couple commissioners, was item number 8 in the staff report, which talks about regulating chain stores on Solano Avenue. So the idea is that businesses with 11 or more fixed locations would be subject to a major use permit. So let's say Starbucks wanted to come in on Solano, that would be a major use permit instead of another type of cafe that might be subject to more streamlined requirements that wouldn't come to the commission.
That's good.
Where did mind if I just kind of come in? Where did the 11 come from?
I was wondering too.
Elizabeth?
Well, I was just curious.
It was more than 10, and I think we looked at some comparison to what some other cities have done.
I have a
San
record.
Francisco, I think.
I believe she mentioned that that's the threshold in San Francisco.
That Commissioner
11?
Commissioner Waddy.
Commissioner Waddy.
Yeah.
What?
Commissioner Waddy mentioned that was the
Yeah,
standard.
I remember her talking about it, and I thought it was a good idea.
And in Chris's previous life, he processed entitlements.
Francisco? Yeah.
Yeah, formula retail was limited, but the threshold was 11 stores.
11.
Nationwide? Yeah, nationwide.
Nationwide, yeah.
We would want to clarify that. We haven't put it here, but let's say the intent was nationwide.
Yeah.
So next, in terms of parking regulations, here we're recommending going forward with those blended rates. So I mentioned right now you've got this 3-page table of different commercial uses, and at least on Solano Avenue, and that's what we're recommending here, to do a blended rate, and we would determine what that is, whether it's one space per 400 square feet or something like that. The other items we've talked about, mostly we've talked about before, but exempting change of use requests. So if you're coming in with just a change of use, regardless of what that let's say we don't go with the blended ratios, regardless of what that parking standard is, if you're under a certain threshold, you wouldn't need to require any additional parking. And then right now, the code exempts the first 1,500 square feet of retail development from required parking standards, and we're proposing to increase that to 2,000 square feet just to encourage more small tenant spaces and reduce the burden of existing parking requirements. Now, I mentioned we did this tenant size study and found that there's, in fact, not that many businesses coming in that are in between that 1,500 and 2,000 square feet.
No.
So that may not be the best threshold we've identified, but it would capture a couple more businesses. And again, this would really apply if we didn't carry forward this other standard of exemptions.
Aren't most of the
for
storefronts
changes in
less than
use.
1,500 or less, aren't they?
So we
Majority?
were just looking at new, there's a little table.
There's a table in the staff report, and
Page
what I did was I went back and looked at about a 4-year window of different infill businesses that we had that were that applied for the parking reductions because they either have limited off-street parking or no off-street parking. The intent with that was to give you kind of a snapshot idea of the overall tenant size. In general, they tend to be pretty small.
Yeah.
There were really only 2 that were in excess of I think there were 2 that were in excess of 1,500 square feet.
Oh, I see here, yeah.
So looking at the table on page 7,
Oh, yeah.
we'd capture this one brewery would get this additional exemption. Now, I will say that bullet point 3 becomes sort of moot if you end up wanting to go with exempting in terms of changes of use, it becomes moot if you want to go forward with the exemption for all changes of use. Now,
Yeah.
new construction, this 1,500 square foot standard that you already have in your code would continue to apply. minor one, number 4, just allowing staff to determine ratios for unlisted land uses rather than having the commission make the determination. And then lastly, eliminating the survey requirement for infill tenants, and we've added a threshold there of up to 2,000 square feet. So if you had a space that was larger than 2,000 square feet, you would still go through that survey and waiver process.
Just to clarify, can you explain how numbers 3 and 5 relate to each other? Or rather, I guess that is what I'm asking. If we're already increasing the ground floor retail exemption to 2,000 square feet,
Maybe it should be like 1,000.
when does I'm just trying to figure out when the survey and infill requirement, survey and waiver requirement would apply,
So
that would need to be eliminated.
yeah, that's a good point. So essentially, they would go hand in hand. If we use that 2,000 square foot threshold, then we'd be saying, okay, if you come in with a space more than 2,000 square feet, you would need to go through the waiver survey process to get any sort of exemption. So it kind of aligns the two. And anything, if we raise the item number 3 exemption from 1,500 to 2,000 square feet, we're saying any new construction or change of use below 2,000 square feet would not be required to provide additional parking regardless of what the ratio is for that use. And so to kind of bring this all together, I didn't include this table in the report, but just thinking about how these different parking revisions would affect the outcome, it's a little bit mixed. So if we go with the blended parking ratios, you may end up with some ratios that are slightly higher, today than they would be with the blended rate, some that are kind of lower, and so maybe we end up, sort of nets out zero. But it makes the code a little more simple and simplifies things for new construction. If in the case of, I don't know if UC Village is the best example, but if you don't know what kind of businesses are coming in when you're building out these shells, which sometimes happens, then you have a little bit more flexibility in the code. The increasing the retail exemptions, this is probably something that reduces the number of total parking spaces because we would be increasing that threshold from 1,500 to 2,000 square feet. And then eliminating the survey requirement just eliminates some burden on staff and on the commission to review those, which tend to be, as you know, surveys done in areas where the parking cannot be provided on site anyway. And so we're going through this sort of action of doing the survey and then coming to the conclusion, okay, you don't need to provide the parking, and you can't really physically on the site without demolition. So our recommendation is to take any feedback you have on these revisions, and then we would come back with a draft ordinance for your consideration next month, and then try to get to the council before the end of the year.
Great. I will ask first if anyone in the audience would like to speak. Nope? Okay.
Come on.
Then we can just have a little bit more free-range discussion. So I had a couple questions I just wanted to clarify. So on the use regulations, in terms of expanding full alcohol service to be a permitted use on Solano and San Pablo, I think that only applies if it's in a restaurant, right? We're not talking about.
Yeah, standalone
bars.
bar would still have to go
Okay.
through a use permit review.
Okay. But I remember we got a use permit application within the last year for someone who was
Yeah.
trying to expand to
Yeah,
full bar, right?
Everest Cafe, they were rescinding, I believe it was a type 41 beer and wine, and then upgrading to a full liquor
Right.
license.
Okay. So it would remove that kind of hurdle for someone who was who was going through the state licensing process already.
Exactly. They then have to go through a separate process with the city, and we processed one for Little Star Pizza the previous year. So
Just to talk about the formula retail idea a little bit more. Yeah, and where did the 11 come from was one of my questions, because it seems like, if what we're really concerned about is like Starbucks, the threshold could be like 11,000 before we got to it. And, right? And I mean, I guess I just have no idea whether there are very many chains that,
Yeah.
break at the 10 store point to begin with.
I'm going to ask Chris, in his experience doing that in San Francisco, what types of stores you maybe exceeded that 11 store threshold that had to go through the process or that you processed?
Yeah, I mean, I think the overall intention is to encourage local businesses to be there. I remember just one specific project, I didn't even know if they had more than 10. So I just know that it's a strict rule with the SF planning department. So I had to confirm that before and signing, waivers and all that stuff.
Okay.
We had this issue come up in Berkeley at the station, the gas station up there. Was it Union 76? Is that what it is?
Oh, right.
Where they wanted to bring in
Walgreens, right?
a Walgreens, maybe, a big chain drugstore. And the neighbors, I mean, they're off this our neighborhood almost. They really have fought it. They fought that chain coming in and won. Won. And the chain had bought the land, as I recall. They'd already invested money in the land. And so I don't know about now, and this was a few years ago, but there was real opposition to having a chain come in. So, and I'll admit that I look at the CVS there in the middle of Solano, and I say, I know you just sense something's different about it. It's a chain, and it's I don't know. I patronize it, but still, I thought when Elizabeth brought up the idea, I was supportive of it, and I still am.
So I guess I would love for all of Solano and San Pablo to be local businesses. I know already that's not the case, right? We have a CVS, we have a Safeway, we have a Domino's, we have a Subway, we have, I guess we don't have a Starbucks in Albany. Oh, just in the village.
Just in UC Village.
UC Village. On Solano, it's farther up, it's in Berkeley.
That's in Berkeley,
Yeah.
But we have that new Mountain Mike's. That's a big chain. That's in Albany, isn't it? Or is that-
No, I think
No,
Mountain
that's-
Bikes is in Berkeley.
It's in Berkeley. Oh yeah. Okay. And
But-
they got in. That's interesting.
Yeah. But I mean, I think I'm generally in favor of the intent of this, but I also, we keep hearing about how hard things are for retail right now, and I don't know how crazy I am about putting up, additional barriers to retail, and I'm also just not sure how concerned we need to be about it. I don't really see, a groundswell of chain stores trying to come in on Solano. I mean, maybe that just means we don't need to worry about it because we're not going to be stopping anyone who's trying to set up shop anyway. But I guess I would want to think through a little bit more, like what are the criteria that would go into, if we are going to put some kind of use permit process in place for chain stores. I think we want to be clear about, like what are the criteria, just to set clear expectations, because again, if the overall goal here is to reduce barriers to businesses being successful on these corridors, I just have some concerns about putting up additional barriers and want to think through it a little more.
And what
The only barrier we're putting up here is a use permit requirement.
Well, exactly, but
And if they're a chain
again,
store, they can afford to get a use permit, I think.
no, fair enough. But if the whole reason we're considering all of these topics is that there was direction from the city council to try to streamline things, and that includes removing use permit requirements where we don't really think it's adding value. So maybe this is a place where we think it adds value to the community to put that kind of checkpoint in. I don't know. I don't feel like I'm convinced that we need something like that. And I guess I know Commissioner Waddy is the one who was really vocal about it, and maybe we want to hear her experience from San Francisco. And I know you've been here a million times and don't want to keep coming back to do more study sessions, but I just, I don't know. It just seems like something that we need more information about. And
I think to your point, Chris and I are usually the first line of contact for any prospective business that's coming to town, and overwhelmingly we're always dealing with local folks. I can't recall the last time I dealt with a chain or a franchise on either corridor. We often deal with a lot of local people who either live in the community where they live, in Berkeley and El Cerrito, and they want to start their business here because of the vibrancy of Solano.
One thing we could do if you want to carry this forward, so in this item 8, we mentioned to ensure that storefront design and use are consistent with the district purposes, whether it's findings about the storefront design or the signage. For example, the Starbucks on Monroe, that plan set was sort of formulaic, and you get the plans and it's a menu and they've crossed out certain things, and so that kind of thing maybe you do want to review here, because then you feel like you can weigh in on the signage or the storefront design to make sure it's consistent with those purposes. So we could, if you want to, we could narrow that focus into a few key elements, which I think are design related, as opposed to even really use related.
Correct.
Or increase the number of fixed locations. Maybe 11 is not appropriate, but 100 or 1,000 would be.
Yeah. No, we applied the San Pablo Avenue design guidelines to the Shell station over here on their signs,
Changed their
and
sign,
oh
right.
boy, they fought that.
Right.
They did not like that.
Right.
And they wanted their sign, and we didn't give it to them, and I think they were very upset about it.
Right, and you might remember we came back with the Sprouts sign, which was very large.
Right.
And
the
we
Sprouts,
had
yep.
both the San Pablo design guidelines, but we also had a master sign program for
Right.
UC Village.
Yeah.
So maybe there are some parameters. And I don't want to suggest when we come back in the ordinance that you can't make any changes, but maybe, if you do want to move and have us go prepare the ordinance, we could still tweak things when we bring it back.
yeah, because I guess, just very generally speaking, I would be less concerned about a chain that has 11 stores nationwide than I would be about a chain that has 1,000. And so I think maybe that's a way to get at it. And I think having some design standards would be helpful. So, but, as you mentioned, if there are ways to have input into that process, I would be in favor of that. And again, I'm not shooting down the idea. I'm not quite there yet.
And I guess if you could clarify to me, why is this only restricted to Solano Avenue and not San Pablo Avenue corridor? And I ask it because we have, things like CVS, Safeway, 7-Eleven, all on the San. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Reverse that.
My thinking, and this is some of, I'm interpreting Commissioner Waddy's ideas, were that Solano is a really unique local place, and the types of businesses there are serving a local audience versus San Pablo, which is much more regional in nature, and where chain stores are less surprising to see, I think. And when you get some of those larger footprints that are occupied by larger tenants and vendors.
Bevmo.
Bevmo, Albany Subaru,
Pet Food
Pet
Express.
Food Express,
The Subway.
Sprouts,
Sprouts.
Taco Bell,
That's right, Taco Bell,
list goes on.
Wells Fargo.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and the paint stores, I mean, it's like almost,
Well, yeah.
it's not almost all
I-
chain stores, but
Yeah, I
There's a
almost
lot.
feel like that sort of character could be lessened a little bit, so it's not as strong on San Pablo.
I mean, I do think it gets at our attempt to try to get some hierarchy too, that if you are a chain store and you're approaching Albany, then maybe you look at this and you say, okay, well, I can go on to San Pablo without going through this major use permit process versus if I want to locate on Solano, that might add a couple months to my schedule. So it is kind of filtering where that use might go.
Okay.
And that's a value judgment, whether you think that's appropriate or not.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Any other comments?
I think I probably have a few notations I want to ask about. Let me see where I am. That was not one. Yeah. Okay, yeah, well, I'm still nervous, or I have reluctance and have trouble understanding the blended rates, and it's, looks like you're kind of suggesting one space per 400 square feet of commercial area.
That was really just an example, so.
It's just an example?
I said it out loud, but
Yeah,
it's
okay.
just an example. And so we would work with the cities, if you wanted to pursue it, I
Yeah.
welcome your suggestions, and we'd work with staff and the on-call consultant who's willing
Yeah.
to get checked.
Yeah, well, you know, my position here is I really want to be very careful about making parking, about taking parking review out of the purview of this commission. If for no other reason than I think that we are the public framework where some of these projects get reviewed, and I've been through them, and I know that the character of Solano is that you have so many residents living so close, and that those side streets are affected by parking impacts. And if we go too far here, I think we'll close off public discussion and close off an avenue of appeal that the public has about new development coming in on Solano, where they have concerns about what's going to happen with the parking. And so I'm really, I think we're going to, I'm inclined to think we might be going too far here, and that, and it worries me. And I think we've been, when push comes to shove and when projects comes through us, we haven't been denying projects. We haven't been overzealous about establishing parking requirements on developments. We've been approving the developments. But the debates and the discussions we've had, I think, have been valuable, and it does provide, we provide a forum for the citizens to come and have their grievances heard, their anxieties heard. I mean, if we had trouble about parking impacts from the exercise studio in the church, Zumba in the church, that says a lot. To me, we know we have neighbors who are concerned about parking, and the dental office on Ordway was a long battle with a lot of hearings, and the Planning Commission did good work on that because we ferreted out a few more parking spaces, out of that design, and that made a difference, and the neighbors still weren't happy. But
I want to just clarify one thing on that, because I think in that particular situation, it really highlights a part of what we're getting at. And so for the other commissioners' benefit, that's a two-story mixed-use building that was proposed for Ordway and Solano with an orthodontist office and other sort of retail office space. It didn't strictly comply with the parking requirements for an orthodontist office.
Yeah.
However, in looking at the overall building envelope, when they moved an interior wall to get to exactly 1,500 square feet, it magically took away 2 parking spaces, which they didn't need, because now they were maxed out on that exemption. And so I think that actually says a lot kind of about I don't want to get too chippy about this, but I mean, it just kind of shows, depending on how you organize the numbers on paper, you can make the code work, but it doesn't materially change the building envelope or the uses that are proposed.
Yeah, then, I mean, I feel like we've kind of had a version of this conversation many times, and my position on it hasn't changed, and I don't think I want to rehash everything, but big picture, I don't think it makes any sense to have use by use parking requirements for individual tenants on Solano where tenants are not going to be able to provide additional parking. I think asking them to go through the motions of like, it doesn't really matter at the end of the day if we approve it, because going through this administrative exercise is just making work and is not providing meaningful information to the commission or really to the members of the public. And I am very supportive of moving toward a blended rate. And I think you've spent a lot of effort, digging into the thoughtful ways to design some of these tweaks. And maybe there's still some tweaks to be made in terms of, what is the exact square footage threshold and that kind of thing. I wouldn't claim to have all the answers about that, but I do like the direction this is moving in, and I think that this will all simplify and help provide more clarity to businesses trying to locate on Solano or San Pablo what their options are.
There could also be more than one rate, so it might not be one precise standard for the whole district, but I just was looking at the code. For example, restaurants are 1 per 200, retail is 1 per 400, and gyms are 1 per 300. Those are like some of your major uses. So maybe there's a restaurant there's a standard overall that may be a little easier, and then there's a restaurant standard that stays at 1 per 200. It wouldn't necessarily need to be just one standard, but still that would eliminate 3 pages of code and get you to.
No, I hear you, and I know I'm in the minority on this. I just want to be real careful, that's all. Okay, I have a couple other little things. Performance criteria number, I guess this is 5, there's restaurant, bars, and entertainment facilities. You're suggesting business hours of 8 a.m. to 11 for restaurants and 8 a.m. to 12, I think, Friday and Saturday. I think we've had trouble in the past with neighbors in the back concerned about restaurants staying open after 10. And I kind of agree with that. I think 10 o'clock is a good bedtime for a residential neighborhood. And
You think for weeknights or
yeah,
all
when the
nights?
restaurants try to stay open later than that, I know in some in Berkeley, and I think some in Albany too, or when they might, one had an entertainment permit at one point, and they stayed open till midnight or something like that. Neighbors were upset, and they pushed hard for a 10 o'clock closing period.
Is it the Grazi Burger?
Which one was it?
Grazi Burger?
I don't know. Oh, maybe. I can't remember. I think it was a long time ago too.
Yeah, that would have been about,
Yeah.
I guess, 6 years ago.
Oh, I'm thinking.
The one tricky thing with that was that went on appeal to City Council. It affirmed a closing time. That then restricted their ABC license. And so when they went to amend their ABC license, basically when you get that license, you have to have hours that are established. It may not necessarily be your actual operating hours, but
Right.
they're the hours that are identified on your license. They came back about 18 months later to formally amend their use permit to extend the hours on paper for the purposes of ABC, but not in actual practice, because
Yeah.
they saw that wasn't really sufficient for their business.
And the tap room did that on San Pablo,
Right.
didn't they? Yeah. Mhm. So you think 11 is what we should do then, huh?
I mean, I think I kind of look at it 2 ways. I think 11 is not bad. I can appreciate the concerns of having residential uses next to restaurants, but I also think that for a lot of these businesses, they tend to self-regulate based on the market demand, and
Correct.
so,
They-
they may find it's absolutely not worth their while to
If
stay
they
open
close by
past
then,
10.
Yeah, I know, yeah. Mhm. Okay, all right. So maybe okay, blended ratios. All right. Exemptions. The 2,000, I asked about, it looks like, wondered where that came from. Okay. We're not doing anything about employee parking, and should we? I don't know. I think it's a hard one.
We don't currently have any standards in place for employee parking.
Right.
So if we did go in that direction, that would be new territory for us.
It would what? Yeah.
No, it's just the
Yeah.
blanket ITE rates.
Is it just
I don't know if we
assumed to
want to
be
go there.
within
I don't know
the
if we can go
existing
there.
I think so.
ratios?
Pardon? What?
I was asking if it's just assumed to be part of the ratio that's already established.
It's probably included in the ratios. Yeah, I think that, yeah.
I think those ratios come from ITE manual,
Probably, and
and my guess is that those ratios account for employee parking.
Yeah, include employee parking.
Yeah, we don't have anything explicit within the municipal code.
Yeah, it's a difference in duration, and it raises the issue of residential parking permits and all of that. It would be going in the opposite direction of what we want to do here, be adding more regulation and everything, but yeah, I know it's an issue on some of those streets. I know that, for the people who live there. Okay. In your draft changes, let's see. I had, maybe this is, maybe a couple little typos or questions here. On the first red line in attachment 1, is that what we're just, is that just,
Yes, that's
discuss that
great.
right now here too? Okay. So there's, so the first red line reads, encourages the redevelopment of underutilized parcels into pedestrian-oriented, I think it should say retail, and then comma, office and high-density residential developments?
Okay. Yes.
Is that right? Mm-hmm. Okay. And high-density residential developments which may be in a mixed-use settings. I'd say which are preferably in, or, I don't know. So we're, yeah. I don't know that we want to say must. This is San Pablo. I forget, I need to go back and recheck exactly what the zoning is. Is it a must? I think it's a may, or a
This-
preferably.
This is
So-
this is a red line of the actual ordinance, so right now it must be, it is may.
Oh, so it says may?
Change it, yes.
So- Okay, then I guess we better
But we,
go with that.
but we could
Okay.
change it if you want.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. That's my mark there. Oh, and the next one, 3, you've crossed out, you've Xed out the word uses, and I don't think it should come out. Where it
Line
says the
40.
industrial uses consistent, the third line,
Right, you're right,
you see it?
yes.
Okay. And that's probably all. That's probably all. I looked at all this other loosening of the regulations carefully. Okay.
Thank you.
That was it.
I'll just, excuse me, I'll just throw out a couple comments. Probably repetitive of what's been said already, so excuse me for that. But yeah, I mean, in general, I'm kind of I'm generally in favor of the blended parking ratios, and I guess I somewhat empathize with Commissioner Donaldson's comments about the parking and making sure that we're still able to kind of somehow have a overview of that. So one is, I'm just going to throw this out there, and maybe it's just an arbitrary number, but maybe instead of changing it to 2,000, have the threshold be 1,750, or we're increasing a little bit, but we're not sort of going way out there. And then my other sort of question, just for clarity, is if we do number 10, the exemption for change of uses, would that go hand in hand with the square footage? So if it was, let's say, a change of use which is exempted, but their square footage is going to increase beyond our threshold, would it then still have to go through the review? And I just want to get clarity on that.
Yes, so if we exempted a change of use request, if there were additions, increases in floor areas beyond ADA or building code upgrades, or if it was new construction, then it could be subject to this item 11, if that's what you're referring to.
Okay, yeah.
So item 11 would still apply to new construction or additions, whereas 10 would just apply to changes of use.
Okay.
And essentially, changes of use become moot in item 11 because regardless of the size of the business, if it was just a change of use, it wouldn't be subject to additional parking requirements.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. That helps clarify for me. That was my only comment and kind of question.
And I guess I want to ask you, I think I am the right person. Where are we on regulating amplified music in restaurants or bars? Or where are we now on that? I'm thinking of the Ivy Room down there, and at one point they were coming to us to get a permit for music, and then it died and it never came back, and I don't think we ever gave them a permit.
I recall when they were under previous ownership, they were
Yeah.
in here, but I'd have to go back and refresh my memory. I know there was one component of it.
Yeah. And
In general, the way our code is structured right now is that if you have live entertainment, it becomes a component of a use permit. So I think, as an example, the Grazi Burger the tap room has live music as a component of their use permit, so that's how we've been
yeah,
regulating
that's right.
it.
I remember that. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So we would allow it, and when they get a permit for the bar. But then if they don't have a permit, they'd have to get a permit to have music. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Okay, well, thank you very much for all your work on this, and I think
Yeah.
we'll look forward to seeing the actual ordinance language next time around.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, number 9, announcements, communications, discussion.
Nothing new to share.
Okay, nothing here. Next meeting, Wednesday, November 14th.
2 weeks,
Okay.
no, 3 weeks from tonight.
3 weeks?
We have Halloween next Wednesday, and then the 7th.
Oh, right,
Yeah.
What?
Halloween is next Wednesday, so we have a 5th Wednesday for October.
right.
We,
Okay.
Yeah, we miss it. November 14th. Okay.
So
All right.
post-election,
Oh,
Right.
my gosh.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
post-Halloween.
All right, I guess we're adjourned.
we-
Thank you.
Yeah.